afternoon, everyone. We're so happy to have you join us today. Our U.S. Black Chambers webinar, Managing in this New Business Reality, is brought to you by Wells Fargo. These are truly unprecedented times that we know are impacting both you and your business, and Wells Fargo is here to partner with you throughout this crisis. On behalf of the U.S. Black Chambers, Inc., thank you for joining us today. My name is Alisa Joseph, and I serve as Director of Programs for USBC. Many thanks to Wells Fargo for sponsoring a series of 6 webinars designed to help you navigate your business to weather this pandemic. With information in Washington, D.C. changing so rapidly, and with PPP and EIDL funds exhausted as we await a new congressional appropriation, it was important that we talk about these changes and its impact on business owners trying to juggle all of this information. Today, we are joined by Antoine Ford, President and CEO of Enlightened, Inc., and Marvin Clark, President and CEO of KLA One, for a compelling conversation. I'd like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions to us by using the form at usblackchambers.org/cares-act/. Our guests today are here to inspire, level set, and provide insight and solutions for everything from preparing for the next round of funding to ways to cut expenses and become creative in structuring changes in your business. I'd like to begin with Antoine Ford. Antoine is the President and CEO of Enlightened, Inc., a leading information technology and management consulting firm founded in 1999. Enlightened serves federal, state, and local government agencies and provides cybersecurity, software development and integration, management consulting, and business process outsourcing services. In 2016, the company expanded its service offerings to support the transportation and healthcare sectors. As co-founder of Enlightened, Antoine has led the company's growth from a startup business to a diverse organization with over 200 employees. He continually leads the company's corporate vision, strategic planning, and innovation efforts. As a thought leader with a keen eye on emerging trends, his passion is to develop and deliver business solutions to problems of global, national, and local significance. Antoine serves as the Vice Chair and Regional Director of the East Coast region of the U.S. Black Chambers. In January 2018, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser appointed Antoine to Board Chair of the District of Columbia Workforce Investment Council. The council is a convener of local and regional workforce system partners assembled to enhance the capacity and performance of the workforce development system. In March 2019, he was appointed to the board of the National Association of Workforce Boards, NAWB, a national organization dedicated to the continuous improvement of work in the workforce development industry. An advocate for community investment, youth mentorship, and corporate philanthropy, Antoine's personal philosophy is, to whom much is given, much is required. He spends much of his personal time mentoring youth and overseeing the management of a robust and award-winning internship program at Enlightened. He also serves on the advisory board for the Howard University School of Business Information Systems. Welcome today, Antoine, and thank you so much for being with us. These days, being a successful business owner isn't enough. Tell us a little bit about your business and how you have had to rethink your business model and strategies during all this turmoil.
Well, as a company, we have multiple locations. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C., but we have folks in upstate New York and Buffalo. We have people in Albany, New York City, New Jersey, and San Antonio, Texas, and a few people out west. And so as a pseudo-national company, we've had to really rethink everything because some of our people were remote, and a lot of people were here. And so during this particular crisis, we've had to rethink to be a 100% remote organization, which has a set of challenges unto itself.
In light of that, Antoine, tell me a little bit about what you may have had to do just, in maybe the first few days of this crisis that was a little bit different than what you've had to do in the past.
Well, that's a great question. So we had to make the decision, particularly in headquarters, how were we going to manage a company where we had a headquarters staff, that's the heartbeat of the company, and everyone needed to go home. So we had to first make a decision. How do we work from home where people are used to being headquartered downtown DC? How do we get people internet access? How do we get computing equipment? We had to go get new phones. We had to really look at what schedule were we going to have for people who had to come back in. So for example, we still got bills coming in. So that means somebody needed to come back to headquarters and get the bills. Some of our customers still pay us via check every now and then. We need to be able to check that. How do we do in a remote infrastructure, remote society, still come into the office periodically to pick up things? So we had to create a schedule and make sure people, while respecting social distances, were able to still operate the way the business had to do. So that was in itself a logistical challenge that we had to support.
Wow, that just sounds just so overwhelming, and I know that it took a lot of effort on your staff's part to really make that happen. So today we're going to share two perspectives: those from our business owner having to jump through hurdles to keep moving forward, and from a lender giving advice to clients trying to understand and move quickly in this changing environment. At this time, I'd like to welcome Marvin Clark from KLA One.
Marvin, thanks so much for joining us today. As you listen to Antoine, there is clearly a lot for a business owner to consider to adapt quickly. How did you advise your clients prior to PPP funding going out?
Well, what I've done is I reached out, several of my clients have reached out to me. We've had the conversation about the PPP plan. And what I've done is sat down with them and we've had a conversation about contacting their banker if they have a relationship at a current bank here in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And also reach out to their CPA or bookkeeper because the program provides 8 weeks of cash flow for business owners who are in need. And I told them all businesses are eligible. It's a 2-year maturity date. There's 1 year, the interest rate is 1%. There's no payment for the first 6 months. No collateral or personal guarantee required, and no fees. And the best thing of all is that the loan can be forgiven if they follow the correct steps.
How has the world changed in just like 1 or 2 weeks? I mean, it's just been amazing, everything that everyone has had to go through. As I was listening to Marvin, Antoine, it sort of struck me as to think about what your process may have been for applying for your PPP loan and receiving funding for that. Can you tell us a little bit about what that process was like?
I mean, the timing was perfect. I mean, to be honest with you, because our customers had started to call us and they had started to say, "Hey, Antoine, we may have to lay some of your people off." And so we had such a sense of urgency because you're talking about some of my hourly workers who run some of the call centers in the business process outsourcing who were calling me, "Antoine, what are we going to do?" And so we had a sense of urgency when it came to understanding this PPP, understanding where it was coming from. So we initially said, what can we do to save and help our employees, first of all? Because other than that, my customers saying we need to lay them off. So the first thing we did was we quite honestly asked my customers, can you work with us and give us a week or two and hold off on laying the people off until we try to pursue these grants? And so we went out and tried to pursue every grant we could. This one was the most promising. And so we literally put our energies towards this PPP grant and jumped on it really quickly, much faster than normal. But we put our energies towards this.
And, I know just from our own experience here at USBC that, trying to just keep pace, as regulations are being written like on a daily basis, and changes are happening on a daily basis. What are the kinds of things that you had to do in terms of your advisors that worked with you, what it meant as they were changing regs on the fly? What kind of information did you have to gather and put together?
But that's a great question. I mean, we established, I think we call it a kitchen cabinet pretty quickly. Our banker in general had experience with SBA lending, which was a massive advantage for us. And so the first thing we contacted our bank and said, we want to apply for this. What do we need to do? What information we need to gather very early while we were trying to figure this thing out? Then we contacted our accounting firm and we said, help us understand rules and regulations. And when we get the funding, and we said when we get the funding, how do we need to set this up? Because we had to as they say, build the ship as we fly. So at the same time, we're trying to apply for the grant and understand that it was changing. So you mentioned something that was a good factor. We would turn in an application, and the next day it would change. So as an example, originally your 1099s were eligible. The next day your 1099s were not eligible. So these are your contractors. Then it was just your W-2 staff. And so we had to change the application. And so every day we were changing and then going back to the banks. Is this right? Going back to the accounting firm. What information do you need to have? And so we had a recursive process that we used to ensure that every day we were gathering new information such that the day they said, turn the application in, we were going to be ready real time. But that required us literally to be on the phone every night to maybe midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, gathering new information, working with our banks, working with our accounting firms, gathering information such that we had information that was real time.
As I listened to Antoine talk about using his kitchen cabinet, I'd like you to put your banker hat on. Listening to his experience, can you share why it's important not only having a kitchen cabinet, but how to be prepared for the process?
I would say to be prepared for the process, one is to understand the rules and eligibility requirements, understanding that 75% of the funds have to be used for payroll and that 25% can be used for mortgage interest payments, rent, lease payments, and utilities. So make sure that you follow those guidelines. But going back to the kitchen cabinet comment, I would say that Antoine was on point because it's about a relationship between the banker, your CPA, and the firm, and of course you, the CEO or CFO of the organization. Understanding that it's a partnership, that everyone should work together to make sure that the process is seamless and the application is completed as correctly as possible. What I'm hearing from my colleagues, I know this wasn't part of your question, but what I'm hearing from my colleagues and other bankers out in the market are that applications are being slowed down because they aren't filled out correctly, or individuals are putting in place or are putting information on the application saying they need operating expenses covered. The program is specifically designed for payroll expenses, so specifically put down payroll expenses, therefore eliminating an error popping up in the bank that you're gone to for funding saying that the application is incomplete. So following that process and understanding that the needs are for payroll and for 75% for payroll and 25% for mortgage interest and other expenses related to the program.
Antoine, I'm so excited that your firm was approved under the program. You know, we've heard so many stories of businesses that have not had the ability to not only get into the portal, but to even be approved through the portal. How long did it take you to receive your approval?
Only a few days, because we were working with our bank every day. And to be honest with you, I was calling them every night. And so I made sure I had their cell numbers. And so I think we were a pleasant pest, but they were very cooperative. Once we turned in the information, we got approved probably within 2 days. And the reason why it was rather quick is because the other sort of 3 to 5 days we were applying, we always had the information ready to go. So if they said we needed to have our payroll for 2019, we were gathering that information. If we had to have our rental statements, we were gathering that information. Any information regarding healthcare, we were gathering that information, and such that inherently, when we submitted it, we had every information that was already validated and already certified, because we had already run it through them, and they said exactly what it would take to do that. Which is one of my advice to people that, I mean, ultimately, I think we're going to get another tranche of cash. And one of the things I think we need to, we'll talk about that later, but I think we really do need to make sure we prepare, because I think that helped us the most. The other thing we did was we started having additional conversations with our accounting firm, because we got approved on one day. Then 3 days later, they said the fund should hit your account on a particular day. And I think that day was Friday that it actually hit our account. But what we wanted them to do is we actually started working with our bank that said, when it hit our account, we want you to transfer the money to a special PPP account that's designated for this particular fund.
So staying on that topic, Antoine, so you've received the funds, and we're going to put up the slide that you've given me about how you're managing through this. But to that end of opening a new account in particular, how then are you managing with that account to stay in compliance with the program? particularly the forgiveness piece of PPP, because that part, we heard about it first, and then it was, oh, you only have 2 months to make sure that payroll is covered in order for you to have your loan forgiven. So tell us a little bit about what you all are doing in terms of managing your account to stay in compliance.
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I'll be honest with you, during the period that we were waiting and managing, we read through the legislation. We sat down with our bank to go through what the forgiveness statutes were. And we wanted to make sure that we did everything possible to make sure that we managed the funds correctly. So what does that mean? First and foremost, we said, let's establish a specific account just for PPP funds, such that anything that comes out of that account will be things that are authorized based on the legislation. So that means payroll. So all payroll activity is going to be run specifically for that account. Healthcare charges from that account. Our rent is going to be paid from that account. Such that when it comes to reporting would be easy for us because we would run all of the transactions that we made from that account, all the documentation for that account, and we didn't have to mix the funds. That made reporting for us very easy, and we understood that when it comes to forgiveness, reporting was going to be ultimately how well your documentation was and to ensure that you did not do anything that wasn't sanctioned. And so from our perspective, we had contacted our all the companies that were going to do auto debits from us. So we contacted our healthcare providers and we said, wait a minute, I need you to make sure you stop debiting our account, and we would do an ACH transfer from the PPP account to you. From our payroll, that handles our payroll, we said, I need you to point to this account to handle our payroll. So we had to coordinate to make sure they weren't going against our normal operations account and went to the PPP account specifically. So it took not only the account, but we had to manage all of the folks that we have to pay funds through, such that when we needed documentation on what accounts they came from, they could also provide documentation to us. So it was a significant coordination effort on our part, as well as making sure our partners, they had to stretch a little bit. So we had to press some people. They said, well, Antoine's going to take us 3 weeks to do this. I said, listen, I'm your customer. I need you to do this next week. And so we had to press them to go against that particular account because I didn't want my reporting to be heavier than it needed to be.
I think those are great tips, Antoine. I know that, as a large company, you've got not only your kitchen cabinet, but you also have resources and you have vendors that, as you said, you pay. And so they need to do what you ask them to do when you want them to do it. And I know a lot of times as a small, small business, I know sometimes it's really tough, but I think there are some key things that you talked about that even as a smaller company are easy enough to do, like setting up a new account, like making sure, whatever's getting transferred from that PPP account is used specifically through that account and nothing else going through that. So even if you don't have an intricate accounting system, you can make those little changes, right, to make that work.
I mean, I think you really have to, and you can't ignore policy issues. I mean, all of a sudden we had to change because all of a sudden everyone's working from home. We have a fund, and so now we have to make sure we're managing it effectively. And so we had to make sure our policies also are supporting the new practices, because from a reporting perspective, if you use the funds in a way that wasn't designated, those funds will not be forgiven. And so that means that we have to make sure everything that we did, every checklist we have, goes to that. And so we even changed certain policies to put those things in place.
Antoine has really driven home the importance of having a banking relationship when things like COVID-19 hit, or even in, quote, normal circumstances, working with someone who understands your business's ups and downs. Marvin, if you don't have a banking relationship, what should you do? Particularly if you're a smaller firm and may not have the resources a large firm like Enlightened does. How are you advising your clients on what to do in light of waiting for additional funding needed for PPP fund and the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program?
What I would recommend is they look at some of the fintech companies that are out there, such as PayPal, Cabbage, and Square, because they can also provide the funding that you're looking for and don't require you to maintain a relationship or have an initial relationship with them in the beginning. Relationships are important. So as Antoine spoke about, having a banking relationship prior to the economic meltdown and COVID-19 is very important, but going forward, you should look to build that relationship. So in the future, you have a resource you can go to directly and have that conversation about, what do you see in the market? Where do you see that my company should go? Should I establish lines of credit? How do you think I should process my payments, and how do you think I can make my banking process more efficient to improve cash flows?
Marvin, I know we are all awaiting this new allocation from Congress any day now. What considerations should a smaller firm like a 1099 independent contractor, sole proprietor, that's different from Enlightened, a large corporation or partnership, kind of considerations should they be thinking about?
Well, I've reached out to several partners that I have in the SBA, and one of the things that was noted about sole proprietors and independent contractors and 1099 employees that they need to have the ability to generate and provide a 940 or 941 or W-3. And they can do this by going to their CPA or their payroll processor company that provides records for their payroll. They'll need to have payroll tax filings. 1099 records would also need to be provided along with Schedule Cs for sole proprietors. That will help them determine the amount of their monthly average payroll and help them get funding faster. There are processes out there, but they definitely need to follow those processes and also understand that there's a cap. So if you are a sole proprietor or an independent contractor, you're making over 100,000, realize that you are capped at 100,000, and any salary over that is not included in this process.
Marvin, for those not able to receive funding, what practical steps can they take right now if they are trying to keep their businesses afloat? What are some things you recommend they do? How does the $1,200 Treasury payment come into play as well?
Okay, I would say that one, use the $1,200 receiving from the stimulus package prudently. Reach out to your vendors and see if you can delay some of the payments or spread them out over time. Also, reach out if you have an SBA loan and you're already a small business owner and have an SBA loan. Reach out to your bank and ask them about the SBA's debt forgiveness or debt relief program, not forgiveness, but debt relief program, and they can help alleviate some of those payments for 6 months. So reach out to your bank for that. Also, consider doing equity lines on your primary residence or vacation homes if you have those, or any other asset that can be used as collateral to give you that cushion you need in order to continue to sustain your business.
And Marvin, are there other banks that are doing regular lending other than PPP lending? Is that an option? You might not get forgiveness protection, but still be able to receive some level of financing. What do you think?
Banks are still out there generating lines of credit for working capital. So I would reach out again to your banker or to your financial institution that you work with to see about establishing either you can do the 7A express loan or a 7A loan, because those are lines of credit for working capital. And just reach out to your bank to talk to about the various products they have other than PPP, even though that is a forgivable loan. But look at establishing those lines of credit to help you for future cash flow needs once this crisis is behind us.
Marvin, and speaking with your clients, what are some of the areas during this time that they need the most help?
What I'm finding is that they need the help in one, understanding the process. So as I stated earlier, I do go back and have that conversation with them about what are the requirements and what they need to do, what they need to provide in order to get that funding. I also discussed the need for a separate bank account to hold those funds so that they're segregated. So when they do go back and ask for the debt to be forgiven, that it's easy to track and look at those numbers directly and see exactly where those funds went. We just talked through, what the next steps are, where they think the economy is going, and also, we discussed lines of credit, other avenues where they could reach out and possibly find funding. Just the other day, I had a conversation. Actually, yesterday, I had a conversation with a client regarding the U.S. Chamber of Commerce offering grants through their foundation. So I forwarded that information on to my client so they could reach out directly and see if it was a possibility of getting a small micro loan, so like $5,000. That they can use toward operating expenses. So we talk about that and other resources. I always say to them, reach out to your chamber, your local chamber, to see what resources they have available. You have CDFIs, you have CDCs, community development corporations. look for alternative sources of funding and just figure out how to trim expenses where you can and do what you can to maintain some level of sales process to generate some revenue if possible.
Marvin, are there other programs out there to help the independent contractors like me I should be aware of?
There are other sources. You can go through your state and local governments. I know DC government has a program for small businesses that are affected by COVID, and so does the state of Maryland as well as Virginia. Unfortunately, they have capped out, but I'm sure that funds will be coming soon to provide additional funding for future use.
Let's see. Someone sent in a question and said, I'm just trying to keep up with all the changes and don't have an advisor. Is there anything new that I need to know about? How do I find out about new updates?
One of the best ways, I think, is becoming a part of an organization like a Chamber of Commerce. I would join your local Black Chamber because, in particular, in my case with the Greater Washington Black Chamber of Commerce, in my local organization outside of my USBC responsibilities, USBC is putting out information all the time to our local chambers. We're providing that information to our local chambers all the time. And so every day we're sending notices about the new laws, the new legislations, what's happening to our members. Right before we got here, we sent something out recently regarding where the potential new act would be when it's coming and what's the funding opportunities. And so there's no one that could do this thing by themselves. And you want somebody who's willing to vet that information as an organization would. And so for me, there's no better time than right now to join a local chamber and organization whose job it is to protect our members. And so one of the things that we're doing is making sure that we're sharing information between the chambers and we're getting that information to our members as soon as possible and taking advantage of this type of event where you're able to hear from people who are dealing with this on a day-by-day basis.
Thank you, Antoine and Marvin, so much for sharing the real about these programs, about your experiences, and sharing advice that could be helpful to everyone who's watching and listening. I'm looking forward to having both of you back during this series. Antoine, I know I have you scheduled for May 14th, so everybody please mark your calendars. He'll be back to talk to us about security issues, cybersecurity issues. With that, Antoine, are there any quick takeaways or any top 3 tips that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I really appreciate this and the opportunity. I just wish everyone a very healthy time. I think one thing is making sure that you take the time to build these relationships ahead of time. One of the key things, advantages for us, is I had a really strong relationship with my bank. I would say as a business owner, you want to have the strongest relationship with your banker, your lawyer, and your accounting firm, because these folks individually are going to be critical for you. We all at a minimum have a banking relationship. If you don't have one, you need to establish one. And I think that's critical. So that's one point. Secondly, I think you should band together. One of the things that we've been pushing in the USBC for a number of years is more joint ventures, more mergers, making sure we're working together. I think I've been partnering more and more with folks trying to do things together, because during this time, I think there's going to be a little bit less when we're finished, but I think it's going to be bigger. So it's going to take more of us together to be able to take something down. And so I think the partnerships and the natural relationships between businesses are a great opportunity. And the last thing I would say, and this may be hard for certain folks, is take this as an opportunity to kind of rethink your business model. One of the things that we're doing within my own company is to say, am I part of an organization? Am I providing services that are critical to my industry? And if I'm not providing services that are critical to my industry, how can I make sure that I evolve such that in the midst of another issue, and we're going to have another issue in life, whatever that may be, that I'm still considered to be critical, because those types of function allow you to be able to sustain yourself and reinvent yourself. And so those are critical things, 3 things that I'm thinking about.
Thank you both so much for taking time today to participate in this great discussion. I really appreciate everything you've shared to help firms who really are going through it right now. Our next webinar, Mitigating Cash Flow Impacts to Your Business, will be next Thursday at 2 p.m. Please feel free to send your questions in advance through our form at usblackchambers.org/CARES Act/. All of our webinar sessions will be available on demand, so you can access them at any time. Please visit uslightchambers.org/CARES Act for updated information on PPP, EIDL, and other COVID-19 issues. And if you're not a member, please consider becoming one to continue to receive valuable information from USBC. Until next time, enjoy your day and please stay safe.